Hello everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to make the first recipe using frijoles as our main ingredient. We're going to be making enfrijoladas. Enfrijoladas are very similar to enchiladas, except the sauce is prepared with beans. This recipe is very budget friendly, which is what we're going to be concentrating on this week. Budget friendly recipes, because I know the economy is horrible right now and many of us are struggling. So I'm going to bring you a variety of different recipes that you can prepare on a budget. Let's get started. We're going to start by peeling the potatoes first. We're going to set this aside. And the potatoes I already washed and dried. They're still a little bit wet, but that is perfectly fine. We're going to start by preparing the filling for the enfrijoladas. So we're going to peel the potatoes, and I like to use a paper towel because once we're done, we can just wrap it up and toss it. And besides potatoes, you can also use other vegetables like calabacitas, zucchini, spinach, whatever you want to add to it. And the filling can also be enjoyed in burritos. So if they don't want it in an enfrijolada, they can always use the filling to prepare a burrito. And we're gonna dice the potatoes into small bite-sized pieces. You want them to be fairly small so they can cook faster. You can also boil them, but I really don't find it necessary to do so. That's just an extra step that you have to take. So we cook it with everything so we don't lose any of that flavor. I'm going to use fresh garlic to add more flavor, but you can also use garlic powder. But using fresh garlic adds much more flavor to the dish. So we're going to use fresh garlic. And then we're going to move on to the onion. The onion is medium sized and I'm only going to use half of it. And I'm already starting to cry, so we're going to stop right here and we're just going to use it like that. And I'm also going to add one jalapeno. The jalapeno is optional. You don't have to add it, but you know me, I like my food spicy, so we're going to add one jalapeno. For the chorizo, I'm going to use pork chorizo. I normally like to use longaniza because it has a much firmer texture and it has less fat. But I had chorizo in the fridge, so this is what we're going to use today. Now, when you're cooking this, if it releases a lot of fat, you can remove some of the fat before you begin to add the other ingredients. We're going to cook the chorizo over medium heat for about 5 minutes or until it begins to release some of the fat. If it has too much fat, you can remove some of the fat before adding in the ingredients: the onion, the garlic, the potatoes, and the jalapeno. We're going to mix these ingredients until everything is well combined. Then we're going to season with a little bit of salt and pepper. The chorizo is already seasoned, so most likely you don't have to add too much seasonings, but you can add additional seasonings if needed. Since we didn't boil the potatoes, we're going to cook this for about 12 to 15 minutes over low heat. In between stirrings, we're going to keep it covered. And we're going to come back and check on it every 2 to 3 minutes to move it around. Okay, so now we're going to blend the beans. We're going to measure about 4 cups of beans. And we have plenty of beans left over for another recipe, which we're going to seal it back up and refrigerate it. I'm also going to season the beans with 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of chili powder, which is pure grounded New Mexico chili powder. Depending on the area that you live, you can find it in your local grocery store or online. It comes in different heat levels like hot, mild, or medium. Using the chili powder, you skip the step of soaking the chili pods in hot water and blending them. By adding just a tablespoon or 2 of the chili powder, it's going to add a lot of color and flavor to your beans. We're also going to season with salt and onion powder. Keep in mind that you can also use fresh ingredients, but we're trying to use as little ingredients as possible. And seasonings is something that you already have in your pantry. The only seasoning that we used when making the beans was salt. Therefore, you might have to add a little bit more salt depending on how much you used. But instead of salt, I'm going to use a little bit of chicken bouillon to add more flavor to the dish. The chicken bouillon we're going to add once the beans are in the pot. This way we can taste it to see how much we need to add. For now, we're only going to add the chili powder, onion powder, and garlic powder. And then we're going to take it over to the blender and blend it until it's nice and smooth. Over medium heat, heat up a small amount of vegetable oil or your preferred cooking oil and add in the contents from the blender. And since we still have a lot of those delicious beans stuck to the side of the glass, I'm going to add about 1 cup of water to the blender to get the remainder of the residue, and then we're going to pour it into the pan. Bring to a simmer over low-medium heat with frequent movement. Once it reaches a light simmer, taste it and add additional salt or chicken bouillon as needed. For the enfrijoladas, the beans should have a thick, runny consistency like this. But if you decide to use them for something else, you can simmer for a longer period of time until it reaches a thicker consistency. For the preparation of the enfrijoladas, we're also going to use cheese. Use your favorite melting cheese of your choice. In my case, I'm going to use pepper jack cheese. Now that we have everything ready, we can begin to prepare the enfrijoladas. I'm going to use corn tortillas, but you can also use flour tortillas. You can also add a little bit of oil to the pan, but since we're using the chorizo with the potatoes, the chorizo already has a lot of fat. We're going to start by adding a layer of cheese to the tortilla. Once we add the papas with the chorizo, some of the fat that renders from the chorizo is going to help to fry the tortilla. So there's no need to add any additional oil or fat. Once the tortillas become pliable and the cheese is slightly melted, fold over the tortilla and gently press down on the tortilla until it holds together. Continue cooking for about 5 minutes or until both sides are nice and crispy and the cheese is nice and melted. Enfrijoladas can also be prepared with just cheese or any other fillings of your choice, like chicken, or you can use leftovers from the previous day to fill the enfrijoladas. Once the cheese is nice and melted and the tortilla is lightly crispy, we're going to place it on a plate, and then we're going to pour a hefty spoonful of the frijoles or the beans. Enough frijoles to where they're completely drowned in the beans. And don't worry if you add too much beans, because beans are very good for you. And to offset all these carbs, I'm going to top it off with a hefty amount of lettuce. Sprinkle with queso fresco or queso cotija, and enjoy with a few slices of red tomato and avocado. You can also add any other toppings of your choice. I'm going to top it off with some delicious creamy crema mexicana. And now for my favorite part, the taste test. My husband could not wait to dig into these because they turned out so delicious. I hope you give this recipe a try because it's so easy to prepare and it's very budget friendly. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in our next video with a different recipe.